Okay. I do not think there's anything in the background that is personal information. So this is Jessie from the JJ system. And I think over the last two videos, you've heard that Jude and Bree are kind of in a spiral over all of the stuff that's going on in Minnesota, particularly Alex Pretti's death. With Renee Good's death, you could kind of look at the video and see that it was one guy who was jumpy, and then you find out that he had been dragged by a car last year. And even though what he did was not right, you can excuse it as a jumpy individual, that jumped. With Alex Pretti, that was not one jumpy individual. That was a gang. A gang of jumpy individuals that are jumpy because this administration is not following the law. And that is rearing up people like me or people like Jude and Bree who have severe justice OCD. Like for those two headmates, my mind headmates, spiritual headmates, they have major problems with unfairness, injustice. And if there are laws that institutions are supposed to follow and an institution doesn't follow it, they go into a tailspin. And that's what I've got going on right now. And honestly, if this snow was not outside, I think we'd probably be driving to Minnesota. Because that's what Jude wants to do. She wants to go to Minnesota, and she's like, I don't care. I don't care what happens. I don't care how safe I am. I just want them to stop terrorizing children and treating other human beings like they're vermin beneath your feet. And she is wanting to go really bad. And then I've got Bree, who's like, we can probably do more behind the keyboard. We can probably do more by explaining to people that we do not object to illegal immigrants being forced to become documented. What we object to is the tactics that are being used by this administration, where they're not following the First Amendment that was put there in place for a reason. They're not following the Second Amendment that was put there in place for a reason. Their law enforcement, that I've seen multiple videos of law enforcement mouthing back at people. All law enforcement that I know are cool as cucumbers. They do not mouth back at people. They don't use sarcasm towards people. I have someone in my family that's in law enforcement, and he chooses his words very carefully because he doesn't want to escalate a situation or say something that can be taken the wrong way in an already tense, escalated situation when you're pulling people who are here illegally and in many cases sending them back. So where was I going with this? I think I've kind of switched into Jude or Bree just a little. I am most worried, as Jessie, I am most worried about the children because my first experience with an illegal immigrant was with one of my students who was only 13 at the time. She'd been here since she was 6 years old. She told me about their journey over, that the first time a light caught on one of the kids' barrettes and they got sent back, barrettes. And then the second time, she was crying, telling me about the second time, because she said that she remembers it so clearly. And she also remembers that her brother was on a man's back as he was climbing over the wall, or not wall, I think it was just a fence. And she said that the man lost his balance and fell backwards and landed on her brother. And she said, and I was so proud of my brother. He did not cry at all. And he was only 4 or 5 at the time because she was 6. And so she'd been there. She'd been here by the time that I got here, her in class, for 7 years. And I don't know if she was on the path to citizenship. I didn't ask because as her teacher, my job was not to disrupt children's lives. And that's where my main concern lies, is what is this doing to all of these children? And Bree makes a very good point that if we think that this is going to be good for us in the future, it is not, because these kids who are being traumatized, trauma does not leave. Trauma takes hold and it roots around in there and it stays, and it, in many cases, can develop into hate. And we're going to have a bunch of kids that are going to hate us and want to hurt our children and grandchildren. Or maybe they are sent back and they get involved in criminal activity and they hate us because of the trauma that our government put them through. Now, there are some cases where that can't be avoided, where you've got a criminal illegal immigrant and his children just happen to be there when he's being apprehended. Sometimes that can't be helped, but I do think that that needs to be part of the problem solving for this task. It does not need to just be bully tactics. Just go in and grab them, and if somebody doesn't like the way that you're pushing a woman, oh, let's just kill him. That's not the way that this should be. It should have full transparency. We should have cameras everywhere in those agencies where they're holding the people, the detention centers. There should be cameras everywhere. They should be able to communicate back to people on the outside just to let them know that they're safe, that they're being fed, that they're with their children, that there are no children that are lost. My biggest concern is the children. But as far as Jude and Bree, their biggest concern is that our government is breaking the law, and institutions should not break the law. Every once in a while, an individual will, because individuals are kind of, they're unpredictable. Individuals do things. But when we have a government that is ignoring its laws in order to do what one man wants to happen, It's when you've got a problem and it needs to change. So anyway, that's kind of where our system is right now. I've barely talked to family members over the last 3 days who voted for Trump because I've just been so upset. Because we knew that this would happen. They knew he was unhinged. They knew he was full of hate. I mean, what does he say at Charlie Kirk's funeral? He said, I hate everyone who opposes me. I don't pray for them. What? But Christians are all in support of him, even though he tells you that he hates his opponents. You're not supposed to hate your opponents. Okay, this is Jude now. You're supposed to love your opponents and your neighbors. And it doesn't need to be a competition. And our entire world has become a competition here lately. It's just really, really upsetting. But it's definitely upsetting when we have laws in place for a reason. We have the First Amendment and the Second Amendment in place for a reason. And then you've got this administration that are breaking it and breaking immigration laws also, showing up to people's immigration hearings when they're already in the process and deporting them, showing up to kids' birthday parties and also putting off pepper spray and all the stuff that, yeah, maybe I'm back to being Jessie. I don't know. It's just really upsetting. So hopefully we're starting to settle down now and get back to normal. But I don't know. We've still got a lot of people that are saying crazy things like, you know, if he'd stayed at home, he wouldn't have been killed. Well, yeah. Yeah. But he had heard about the bad stuff that was happening, and he went out there to record and make sure that no women got violently shoved to the ground with 2 hands by a huge man, which is exactly what happened right before he stepped in to help her up and then got executed for it. And I had somebody say, well, if he hadn't been there, he wouldn't be dead. Well, so what? He can go. You can go and protest. That is our First Amendment. You can record. That is our First Amendment. And he had a gun. Yes, that's his First Amendment. He never drew his gun. He never had his hand on his gun. In fact, the person that I saw with his gun was an ICE agent who then yelled gun and got everybody jumpy, and then they executed this guy. They didn't use their eyes, which is exactly what a lot of people in this area of Kentucky are doing. They're not using their eyes. They're listening to the lies. Use your eyes. Stop listening to the lies. And also think, if this was your son, would you want the government to do that? He didn't deserve to die. I had somebody else that said that there were 56 citizens that were killed under Obama's watch during ICE operations. Yeah, but if they had been executed in the middle of the street by an ICE agent, we would have heard about it, and Fox News would have blasted it everywhere. So those 56 people were probably accidental or in the line of fire when apprehending a criminal or something like that. I know that deaths are going to happen. Deaths are going to happen. Executions should not, though. That's different. And these people are wanting to argue these points. And I'm like, do you even hear yourself? No, what was something else that somebody said? Just, that he shouldn't have had a gun. I don't know. I can't explain it. I do think that there are some that are starting to wake up, but I don't know if it's fast enough. I really think he's just going to take over. We'll see.